All right. We're live. Hello, 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 hello. Kia ora, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our talk, Grafting Black Narratives. My name is Ginae Watkins. I'm a program manager at Riot Games, and I will serve as the moderator for this panel. Our presentation today will be a trio of microtalks and best practices on the care that goes into crafting authentic Black narratives and characters for video games. Our esteemed panel of creatives will share their professional and personal experience on the subject matter and exchange thoughts and ideas along the way. I'm joined by three amazing speakers today. We have Zaire Lanier. Senior writer at Compulsion Games. We have Brittney Morris, author, game writer, and narrative consultant. And we have Jarory de Jesus, founder and director at Coquito Games. I do want to give a quick shout out to our fourth panelist who isn't here today. He couldn't be here. He is an esteemed game writer, comic book writer, and cultural architect, Curtis Baxter. But he has helped us a lot putting this talk together. You can also listen to his expertise and 2 cents via the Crafting Black Narratives panel that we did for DevCom last year. So we want to thank him for his time, and thank you so much, Curtis, for putting this together, this presentation. And now, I'd like to kick things off with our first speaker. Let's see here. Zaire. There we go. Cool.
Is it clicking or me?
Yeah, it's clicking right there. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'm Zaire. I'm really nervous, so if I pass out, just someone in the front row catch me. But my name is Zaire Lanier. I'm a writer and narrative designer. I've worked at Unknown Worlds on Subnautica Below Zero. I did a stint at Naughty Dog for a year. And now I am a senior writer at Compulsion Games, which just shipped South of Midnight earlier this year. And my talk is about how none of humanity is a monolith, and this includes, Black people and basically any other minority group that tends to get stereotyped in media. So I would like to kick off our talk with a little bit of a history lesson. So I overlaid the US over Europe. The United States is huge. Some of our states are as big as like a couple European countries. So there are so many cultures, so many subcultures within not only regions, but within states themselves, within different cities. And speaking as an African American, I would like to talk about the Great Migration, which took place after the Civil War and the Reconstruction era. So the Civil War, the Union versus the Confederacy, was a war over slavery. Some people will tell you it's about states' rights. Those people are highly incorrect. And then Reconstruction is the era after the Civil War that involved the abolition of slavery, the 13th through 15th Amendments, which abolished slavery, addressed citizenship and equal protection under the law, and prohibits voting discrimination. And so from 1916 to 1970, there was a mass exodus of former slaves from the South, and they went to the East Coast, the West Coast, and parts of the upper Midwest, avoiding a lot of the states in the middle because they're not super great. But because of these similar roots, we have a lot of cultural overlap. So this includes music, religion, AAVE, which is African American Vernacular English, and a shared lack of privilege in the United States. So I would like to talk about stereotyping. So stereotyping is highly limiting. It's something that's put upon you by the society that you live in, and it's not something that you seek out for yourself. And so when you are operating within a framework, you're limiting the depth and breadth of humanity that you can give your characters. You already have a preconceived notion of what these characters are and what they can be. And so just for some relatability, I want to talk about our panelists. I'm not necessarily going to go through the whole thing, but we all come from different regions in the US. I come from the Midwest. We have people from the West Coast, the East Coast, the Rust Belt. We listen to different kinds of music. I like movie soundtracks and ABBA, Victoria Monet, EDM, Top 40, and then things that go against stereotype, which is something I don't even necessarily like to say is going against stereotype, but it's things that like we have all said we do that people are like, oh, I didn't know black people do that. So I used to do musicals in high school and college. I played rugby. I bought an RV in my early 20s with a friend, and we traveled for a year and like did a bunch of hikes in national parks. And I remember someone was like, oh, I didn't know black people hiked. And I was like, I have legs and I like to go outside. You're like, yeah, I too like to enjoy the beauty of nature. It's great. I went to boarding school. Brittney was a DDR champion. She's learning Japanese. Mia, made Sonic and Kingdom Hearts AMV music videos, which I don't know, feels kind of stereotypical to me, but Jarory played the flute and also did improv and musical theater. And so when you're creating characters, if you are limiting them to preconceived notions of what they can be, as I said before, like with African Americans, it tends to be athletes, hip hop, and gang culture, because that's often what you see in media, whether it's movies, TV shows, music. But these are things that, again, you're missing out on a whole world of possibility that your characters can exist in. And so it's important to do that with any minority group. I'm sure with any minority group, there are things that are presented most dominantly in the media, but that's not the reality of what people are and what people can be. So our next slide, common roots, different trees. And so this I want to talk about, even though there are things that I think as African Americans you have touchstones that we all can agree upon, there are regional variances. So you might have, the West Coast Crip Walk. You have line dances, voguing, which originated in New York City with black and gay culture. And these are all things that I cannot do. I can't dance. I'm terrible at it. But these are things that within each region, just things that I recognize, like, oh, this is almost kind of like something we do in the Midwest, or this is something like we do in the South. And so how this applies to game writing is South of Midnight. So I worked on South of Midnight as a writer. I'm not from the South, I'm from the Midwest, but my grandparents, as are most African-American grandparents, we grew up in the South. So my grandfather was a sharecropper, which is basically slavery by another name. So after slavery, we weren't allowed to really get jobs, so you would work for a farmer, but you get paid basically nothing. My grandmother grew up on a farm on the Mississippi Delta, and so I pulled upon their lived experiences, some of the ways they talked to their elders, some of the folk tales they would tell me, the tall tales my grandfather would tell me about living in the South. And while I did spend a lot of the time in the country, like I, would run around the woods, I'd swim the creek and all that kind of stuff, it's not the same thing as growing up in the South. And so same thing with compulsion. When I got hired there, I said, I can help, and I think I can write this pretty well, and I'm biased, but I think that we did a pretty good job. But also when it came down to hiring our actors, our voice director, our mocap director, almost everyone came from the South. So I would turn in scripts, and sometimes they would say this is good, but we wouldn't really use this kind of phrasing, or we don't talk to our elders that way, and it was very much a group collaboration. Even when it came down to stuff like audio design and music, we went to the source. We did company trips. Our audio director, we hired blues musicians from the South. We have a song that's a children's Southern gospel choir that came from the South. So again, you go to the people who, this is their lived experience and what they do. So, if I was, going to write a game set in New Zealand, I would go to the source. I would start finding people who, this is their lived experience, not mine, and I want to respect it. And this also creates microcosms within games themselves, where something that, as someone from the Midwest, I played Forspoken, which I kind of ride or die for Forspoken. I think got a little bit of bad rap, but I remember playing it and really like Frey as a character, but my friends who are New Yorkers said Frey didn't feel like a New Yorker to them at all. And so I was like, okay, well that makes sense. I'm from Wisconsin, everyone, dairy farms and everything. I believe you. And then Brittney worked on Miles Morales, but Brittney's from Oregon, which is, a West Coast city. And, she doesn't necessarily know what it means to be half black, half Puerto Rican superhero who grew up in Harlem. And so even within these different games, you still have to find people from that same common root to talk to. And my final slide is about relatability. I feel like this is something that people in minority groups hear a lot about characters. I don't find so-and-so relatable. What does that have to do with me? And my thing is basically that's not like my fucking problem. Like, we are not a monolith. So these are characters that I've identified with. So, you know, the immigration officer in Papers, Please, the computer chip sword from Transistor, Solus, Shadow of Colossus, Clem from Walking Dead. You know, none of these characters look like me, like Solus is an alien, that's a sword, like, you know, I love Clem, but, you know, she's in a zombie apocalypse, like, I would have been dead off rip. I'm not living in this, like, I can't do this. But these are all characters that I really strongly identify with, and growing up, there aren't a lot of characters who look like me more so, and even within, like, the Black community, as a light-skinned Black woman, I have a certain kind of privilege. I see more characters who look like me than, like, say, my mother or my sister, who are both darker than me. Your inability to relate to a character in a minority group that does not look like you or does not have your shared lived experience, in my opinion, is a distinct act of just curiosity, empathy, and imagination, because Black and brown children, queer children all over the world, all their lives look up to these characters. You know, I loved Indiana Jones. I love, you know, all these characters. And it's something that requires an adjustment of your own mental framework. Because again, you miss out on just so many good stories and so many good experiences if you only want to experience people who look like you and experience the same life as you do. And I want to end with this quote from James Baldwin from I Am Not Your Negro. And he says, "You never had to look at me, I had to look at you. I know more about you than you know about me. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." And so, you know, we're here, we're in media, we're in games, we're in TV shows, movies, music, and none of us are going anywhere. So, thank you.
I'm a little shorter than Zaire, so give me a minute. A little shorter than everyone. Hi, everyone. My name is Brittney Morris. I'm a best-selling author and award-winning video game writer. I had the privilege of working with Zaire on... thank you. At Unknown Worlds on Subnautica Below Zero. Most recently, I worked with Insomniac Games on Marvel's Spider-Man 2 and Marvel's Wolverine. If you haven't seen our gameplay trailer, I highly recommend going and checking it out. I'm here to talk to you today about the politics and practicality of Black aesthetics in games and why they're important to consider when creating Black characters. So let's get started. So we'll kick things off with a basic truth that Blackness is a statement, and this applies to pretty much any and all contexts. As Black people up here, especially from America, we don't have the privilege of making stylistic choices that won't be perceived as a political statement. What this means is how your Black character chooses to present themselves in a majority white space says more about their Black identity than any line of dialogue you write will. I'll say that again for emphasis because that is the highlight of my presentation. How your Black character chooses to present themselves in a majority white society says more about their Black identity than any line of dialogue ever will. Now you might be saying to yourself, that sounds like a universal human experience, Brittney. If I put on a purple wig and insist on wearing a hoop skirt the size of a Prius, I might not be accepted into a corporate environment either. And while that's true, misperception as a marginalized person can have consequences far more dire, including life and death. Especially if you're creating a character who is Black and from America, which is notoriously the land of guns and police brutality, where looking like the wrong type of Black person in the wrong place at the wrong time can be deadly. Let's talk about the fun part, shall we? We'll get specific. Let's start with hair. That's a fun one. So natural Black hair has been controversial since we were brought to the West during the slave trade, and it still is controversial today. Afros, for example, were a big part of the Black and Proud movement of the mid-century. Twists and twist-outs, like I have a lock twist-out, were a big part of the new natural hair movement of the 90s, and protective styles like braids or faux locks, appearing in majority white corporate settings specifically, have been perceived as an act of counterculture or rebellion. On the other hand, processed hair, so hair with relaxers or texlaxers, chemical straighteners, have been perceived not only as more professional, but also cleaner and a mark of a safe or relatable Black person in majority white spaces. In fact, it used to be illegal for Black women to wear their hair uncovered in the South of the US, and it wasn't until the Crown Act was passed in 2022 that discrimination officially became illegal on the basis of Black hair, and that actually hasn't even passed in all 50 states yet. I think we're at about half of them. So we still have work to do. Let's talk about clothes and accessories. So there's a fine line between being perceived as edgy versus uncultured as a Black person, or in creators' cases as a Black character. Basketball shorts, for example, over compression leggings might make your character look like a sporty any kid inviting you into a pickup game of basketball. Think Miles Morales, right? But sagging pants, however, might carry a stereotype of violent tendencies, gang affiliation, or a history of brushes with the law. These are, of course, false and harmful narratives, but your character would know that they're still alive and well, and that that's something they have to consider when they're making their style choices. It's a hard line to define, but a good rule of thumb is that if you choose an outfit for a Black character, if changing their race to Caucasian makes them look urban, that's a fun word, it's probably a safe outfit. If changing their race to white makes them look like they have an identity crisis, think Vanilla Ice, it's probably not a safe outfit. As for accessories, certain accessories are perceived as bolder statements than others. There are stereotypes surrounding culturally significant items like bonnets, as you can see on the screen, and do-rags, which we wear to protect our hair at night while we sleep. But when worn in public, they're extremely casual, and they can even cause your character to be perceived as uncultured or uneducated, or even the word ghetto. An Afro pick, on the other hand, might signal that your character is Black and proud, right? Jewelry like earrings, chains, and grills, especially in men, might signify a pride in one's wealth or accomplishments. If your character chooses to wear accessories like this in a majority white space, it's no casual choice. It's intentional, and that means you need to ask yourself whether your character would choose to wear these things despite public perception or misperception. It's not that any of these choices are wrong or right. You just need to be aware of what your character is saying to the world when they put those things on. They are saying something. It's important to know what that is. So we've covered perception. Let's talk about practicality. So you'll see this handy chart on my screen. If you see a green check mark, it means that the hairstyle in question on the left fulfills the criteria in each column. If you see a yellow, it's up for debate whether it meets that criteria. And if you see red, that is absolutely not happening. I'd like to draw your attention to the silk press right here in the middle, with all the X's going right across. Some of you already know where I'm going with this. If you give your character a silk press, this is the least practical hairstyle on the screen, right? It means they'll have a lot of time on their hands. They'll probably be able to get to a stylist. This is not a style to maintain in a zombie apocalypse, right? Water is a problem. Wind is a problem. Stepping outside of the house with a silk press is a calculated event. By contrast, I'd like to draw your attention to the bottom row, lovingly dubbed the Killmonger hair. You've all seen this. It's extremely prolific. And in case you've ever wondered why, I'm going to explain it. It's because it is not only water safe, it's also workout safe. It requires minimal maintenance. It doesn't require a stylist. It doesn't require much dexterity. It's inexpensive. And this feature isn't on my chart here, but it also can affirm any gender, depending on length, color. It's extremely versatile. The most versatile one on my chart, but there are alternatives, right? And I'm very excited to see those alternatives come up in future games. And finally, I've created for you the Black Aesthetic Perception Matrix. So, disclaimer, this matrix does not account for regional experience, political climate, gender, sexual orientation, occupation, religion, age, or a million other variables that will change how your character's matrix looks. each of your Black characters will have a variation of this matrix in their head when they choose. This is just for hairstyle. This is not about anything else that I've talked about, right? So given the complexity of everything we've discussed here, what's the bottom line? Not only that a variation of this matrix will exist in their head, but to assume that no Black style choice is innocuous. It's important to make sure that every style choice fits who your character is, and that you're choosing things that make sense for your character. And the easiest way to do this is to hire or consult with people who have enough lived experience to weigh in on whether a particular choice makes sense for them. With this knowledge, I wish you all the success in the world, writing marginalized characters of all types, and I wish you happy creating. Thank you.
It's just the green button. It's the green button?
No.
Oh, it's just this one. Oh, it's that clicker. Okay. Thank you. All right. I'm also a little nervous, so be patient with me. This is a pretty sensitive topic as well. So, again, please be patient. My name is Jarory de Jesus. I've worked on some games you may know, including Star Wars Jedi Survivor, the recently announced Saros. They just put out a gameplay trailer for it 2 days ago. I highly recommend you go watch that. Marvel Strike Force, Madden 20, and my own project, Scamp High Hat Havoc. So today we're going to talk about portraying Black trauma in games. No, I'm on the wrong page. Yeah, so I'm here to make everybody sad. Yeah, we're talking about trauma. It is very different in the Black community. Even inside the Black community, there are different ways this shows up. It's a cultural and personal experience, and it's often societally expected that you will handle this yourself. Your community will be there, but this is a very individual journey. A pet peeve of mine is when this is reduced to trauma porn, though, as it's called. This includes things like civil rights, slavery, racism, right? Like, there's more to the Black experience and to a traumatic experience than just these things. And oftentimes in media and stories, this is the only form of trauma that Black people get to experience and have consequences for in their lives. So let's talk about what that looks like for a lot of people. These are all lived experiences that some of my fellow panelists, some of my friends, and many of my colleagues have had. I just grabbed quotes from various people, and these are ones that made it to the board. My father often said, rub some dirt on it whenever I was having an emotional experience, because it's an experience that can be very hidden for people. Often not by the victim, too. It's usually hidden by the friends and family around them. You'll hear things like, there's nothing wrong with them, or this person's just a little bit different, right? They're dismissing away the traumatic experiences that these individuals have had. And this is quite common in Black culture. Especially, at least the one I have heard often from friends is that their friends or their parents have often said that there's nothing wrong, right? And this is a continuous trend. And the thing about trauma is that it's not rooted in a single event. It actually informs your entire worldview and your day-to-day behavior. One of my favorite quotes on this is from Kendrick Lamar in his song Father Time. It's a song where he explores his own traumatic experiences with his father, but also deeply reflects on the traumatic experiences that informed his father's worldview. And this quote informs that his mama died. I asked him why he went back to work so soon. His first reply was, son, that's life, and Bill's got no silver spoon. His father is of an older generation, and we'll get into the generational differences in a moment, but needless to say, he carried his trauma with him and moved without expressing any need for help or desire for that, in fact. And oftentimes our trauma can be seen as an issue, it can be seen as aggression, it can be seen as anger problems, acting out. It's very often dismissed as something else. On the other hand, you might also see the cold shoulder, and this is where the generational differences really come in. Older Black generations tend to move in silence, as they say, and the reason for this is historically, we were not given the support that we needed to process trauma. Younger generations who grew up with the internet had access to community in ways that the previous generations did not. They were able to connect with people and form those bonds. And so you'll see more frequently that younger Gen Z, millennials are more comfortable expressing their traumatic experiences with each other, and often with external groups as well. So it's not just something that, Black folk share with other Black folk. You'll hear, young, especially Gen Z, they're way more likely to talk about it with just everyone around them. Whereas older generations, particularly Gen X, they like to keep that to themselves. They tend to not share their traumatic experiences unless it's with those closest to them. In this video example that I'm going to get to in just a moment, I want you guys to pay attention to how Miles interacts with his Uncle Aaron, two generations of Black individuals. Miles being much younger, he's way more open to sharing what he's going through and the problems he's having. Granted, in this scene, there's a little trick here because the Prowler's also kind of up to something, but he's very distant, detached, and he's not sharing his own problems. He's only serving as a soundboard for Miles. So if you can go ahead and play the video, please.
I gotta call you back.
Oh.
All right, Miles. Spill it. Give me the whole situation.
Then, rocks on, underground. It's just a lot, you know?
You're 17. You're stressed. And you're a superhero. You gotta cut yourself some slack. You still making beats?
And not much since I started this.
Work-life balance, kid. It's the most important thing. Hey, get something you like?
Yeah, really unique dynamics.
See? Old man still knows his stuff.
And you were right about clearing my head, too. I know what to do about Finn. I gotta see her. Try to talk her out of all this.
In person? Where?
Trinity Church. Tomorrow night. Why so interested?
Because you got a target on your back the size of Jersey.
You don't have to protect me.
Someone should.
You know, you said you never finished this tape because of how things went bad between you and Dad. What actually happened between you two?
It was complicated. We were too similar and too different.
You'll notice in that exchange when Miles actually asks about some of the traumatic experiences that his uncle has had with his father, the Prowler deflects and simply gives a vagary, right? He acknowledges that something happened, but doesn't want to go into the detail. And so you'll see this difference in generation. So when you're writing older Black characters who may have experienced trauma, this is something you want to deeply consider. And trauma informs every day, as I mentioned. It's part of your character, it's part of their history, it's part of their outlook. When you consider writing characters who have a trauma-informed history, especially Black characters, you want to consider both the individual and the cultural approach. And I highly recommend you seek out experts who understand that cultural nuance. Not to say find someone who knows trauma, but rather find someone who understands what it means to be Black and what it means to have trauma in that capacity. Find someone who is Latino and what it means to experience trauma in that capacity. Experts exist all around us. We're everywhere. And so, hire someone who knows what they're talking about. And that's my talk. Thank you.
All right, let's give another round of applause for our panelists. At this time, we'll do a quick Q&A, and so our panelists, I believe you should have, 2, 3 mics.
Me too.
And then so if anyone in the audience has a question, we're happy to answer. Yes, we have one over here. Oh, sorry, I think we're gonna get a mic over to you. Make sure you guys are talking to the mic. Okay, cool, thank you.
A really cool talk. I enjoyed it a lot. I was just wondering whether there's like a narrative you guys would like to see or would be interested in being like properly represented?
I would just like to exist in other pieces of media. I don't necessarily have a narrative I want to see. I just want to see us in the narrative. One of my absolute biggest pet peeves is black people wouldn't exist in medieval times or whatever, which is A, historically inaccurate, but also B, neither does that fucking dragon. Oh man, you can have a dragon, but black people is crossing the line. That kind of thinking is something that really bothers me. So I don't necessarily have a narrative I want to see us in, but I just want to see us able to exist in sci-fi, fantasy, I don't know, just any genre out there. Just more of everybody. Honestly, the world has always been such a diverse place, and I think that's my wish. Is just I can't stand that.
I've got one in particular that's stuck with me for a while as a story that I would love to be told, kind of more along the lines of what Zaire was talking about with black characters in fantasy, but I want to go a little deeper, right? I want more black fantasy, the myths and legends that we lost when we were brought over to the States that still exists on the continent of Africa and among the various people there. I would love to see more of those stories told, right? The one I remember growing up with was Nazi the Spider, which Marvel has actually incorporated into one of their recent stories, and it was really good. So, let's get more of that.
I love seeing us subvert stereotypes effortlessly in media, showing us doing things that we don't stereotypically do. I want to see a black person running a zipline company in Sweden. We don't do that yet. I want to see us being the love interest in a lot of things without it being a thing, a statement that we're making, things like that.
Awesome. Great question. Any other questions? We have one over here.
Thank you. Kia ora. I think it's something that we suffer from here in Pacifica as well, in terms of representation of different ethnicities. We get mixed up with each other, right? Do you have any, aside from your discussion here, do you have any pet peeves in terms of what you would want to see, or do you feel like that collaboration and unity as a community as a whole and representing each other is okay? What are your thoughts about that?
To your question, one of my biggest pet peeves is the pretend inclusion, right? Where it's, hey, we're so inclusive and we've got a bunch of diversity, and I look around the room and I'm the darkest person in the room. I'm mixed. I should never be the darkest person in the room. That should not be the case. And so when I see that, I'm like, your diversity feels fake. It feels forced. It feels like you are, I'm here to tick a box and you don't actually care about my opinion. And that, nothing will get under my skin faster than that.
Similar pet peeve. When there's so little of a culture depicted that it's just a box checked. So if you have a character who's Latino and you have a single Spanish line in the whole game, please look at that again.
I think along the same lines is if you hire someone to write a character, and it's more to tick a box than to actually take their consultation into play. I think it's something, if you're going to do that kind of story, it's something that should be done very early in the project rather than, you're 8 months from release and you're like, oh shit. And then you don't really have the time to put those things in. So on South of Midnight, they brought me in relatively early, and so I did get to help guide that process a lot, and the way Hazel looks, and the storyline with her mom and everything like that. Having someone there early on with asset creation and cutscenes and all that, there reaches a point where you really can't change very much. So and people who it might the people in that community will notice. Other people might not, but will notice. Like, it's a very thin veneer. It's not actually anything substantial. And I think that's something that bothers me, because I'd rather you just not do it at all than do it in a very substandard, half-ass kind of way.
So one of the comment I wanted to add to that is also do due diligence, right? As you approach the end of production. The infamous story of Miles Morales and the Cuban flag is probably the one that comes to mind of like a failure to do that. For those who don't know, in the game, Miles is Puerto Rican, and the Puerto Rican and Cuban flags look almost identical, but their colors are reversed. At launch, I guess someone missed that swap, and not having anyone in the room who knew to catch that, right? It goes back to what I said about, when I'm the only one who looks like me in the room, it's part of the problem. But also just no one else caring enough to do the due diligence to check that. Those are probably other issues that I'd run into there.
And then I saw we had a question right here. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Hi. So earlier, you were talking about how different hairstyles will have different like practical upkeep and things like that. And I just wanted to also ask about bubble braids and butterfly locks.
Oh my gosh! Okay.
And how? Yeah. Can you tell me more about those?
Brittney?
I'd love to. Thank you for that question. I've been training for this my whole life. So so admittedly, I have not worn either of those hairstyles. In general, locks are very practical. Really the bigger picture though, with getting specific about hairstyles, is to talk to someone who's worn them and understands the nuance of the upkeep. I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly what I would or would not be able to do with those particular hairstyles because I haven't worn them. It's just really important to ask someone who knows about them, or even consult Google and like watch a video about how to create those hairstyles to give you some clues about what is practical or isn't practical about them. See if you can find those hairstyles in existing media to see how the character is portrayed and what the artist behind them meant to say about the character with those hairstyles. That's my advice on the subject.
I agree with Brittney. Also, something I think is interesting is like a hairstyle can work in like a fantasy magical girl setting versus like, Clem in The Walking Dead. Like, I don't know, Black Sailor Moon, sure, she can have bubble braids or whatever, and it's fine because she's a magical girl in anime and it doesn't matter. But, if Clem is running through the forest and getting chased by a horde of zombies, like, oh man, you snagged your bubble braids on a tree and now you're gonna die. Like, so it really depends as well. I think with all these things, it kind of exists on a spectrum. But yeah, I like Brittney said, like, go on YouTube or whatever. But also, I think it also depends on the setting and the kind of story you're going to tell, because certain types of media and certain genres give you a little bit more of a like playful leeway in these types of things than other ones do, which is something I also would like to see explored more, because Black hair has like such an interesting history and we can do so much with it, and I would love to see more of it represented in media.
I would also check out the content creator Ebonics, also known as Danielle Udo Garanya. So she is well known for creating Black hairstyles and like nail sets and clothes for The Sims, and she's been doing it I think for almost a decade. And so she has all types of free downloadable assets that players can use to customize their Sim character, and I know bubble braids is one of them for sure. Oh, Ebonics, that's EBONIX. Yeah. And I would just say Sims. We love you. Yes. Oh, sorry, over here. Go ahead. My bad. Sorry.
So there's a bit of a context or story behind this quickly. So we were working on a avatar customization, and it was with an external licensor partner, and we got some interesting feedback. I don't think the person who, I think it was from a white person, so I'm not sure, but that They were concerned that players having the ability to combine black hairstyles with white skin would be culturally appropriative, and that they felt like we should disallow certain combinations. And we were all a bit like, well, that makes assumptions about like what people's skin colors are and how textures might mix with different skin colors and things like that. So we weren't sure. But I guess to translate that into a question, I was curious to know what your ideal character customization interaction looks like.
Oh, that's a really good question.
So on Maddie, we worked on a character creator as well, and a similar conversation came up, right? And I jokingly pointed out to one of my colleagues, I was like, well, Sean Paul exists, right? He's a white Jamaican individual, but he's or mixed, I believe. Anyway, he's light-skinned Jamaican, but he wears dreads, right? So, or locks, my bad. And I think the idea of barring a player from expression because you're worried about how it's more about what the player chooses to do than what you as a company choose, especially if you're not an online game, right? Like if I'm playing Skyrim and I want to make, a Khajiit woman with dreads or something, because that's how I want to role play this character, then I'm allowed to do that as a player. And it doesn't say anything about Bethesda as a company other than they allowed me to do that. Now, if you're an online game, I would look at Rust because there's some good lessons to be learned from that game, particularly in like how they didn't allow the player to create any customization at all. And there was an experience for a lot of players who got assigned black characters where they experienced racism for the first time in their lives because they were not black and they were playing as black characters online. And so they took some interesting measures to combat that, and I would use them as a case study.
Yeah, I agree with Jarory. There's always going to be bad actors. The customization menu giveth and taketh away. Like, it's really great, and sometimes it's like really terrible. In terms of things I would like from a customization menu, I would like better skin tones. I feel like that doesn't happen very often. You run the gamut from like very, very pale to like very, very dark, and then like just like kind of grayish brown in the middle a lot of the time. So I would like to see a better understanding of the way various shades of black and brown skin reflect light, and also just more hair options. I feel like it's always like a messed up fro, like 6 braids, and like maybe like a little like really rough low Caesar fade like type thing. I just a few more options. Like I understand that it's a little bit more difficult maybe, but like the resources are out there. We've been doing this for years now. So I don't need the world, but it would be nice to just have a few more options, I think.
So we have a few more questions. So we're gonna have one of you guys answer those questions each. I saw you had one, you have one, and then I see one in the back. So we have these 3. Yes, here, and here. We got a little triangle.
Mike. Actually, my question was really similar to Kara's, but I was thinking in terms of like animation or cartoon versions of characters. So I was thinking really similar along those lines of how do you feel about that representation in those terms, and how do you want to guide people who are creating cartoon versions or characterized versions or even non-human type versions with certain voices and accents that might be trying to be a certain character? Like, have you got some advice on what could be done around that? And yeah, how do you feel about that?
I can take this one. So animation is also a great opportunity for cultural expression. The example I love to give is when I was working on Marvel Spider-Man 2, and we were creating Miles' character on his school campus at Brooklyn Visions Academy. We looked at dialogue, of course, we looked at personal style, we looked at all sorts of things, but Black cultural expression goes way deeper than that. And even in just the way he walks, the animation director who was on his character was Black, and he came up with the idea of giving him daps. For those who don't know what a dap is, it is the fancy handshakes you might see your Black friends do when we meet each other in public. And so when he walks up to certain classmates of his that he's really familiar with, he'll dap them up. He'll lean into AAVE and some more casual tones. And then when he walks up to a teacher, he says, "Good morning, Miss Jackson. How are you?" And, it kind of disappears a little more. So all that to say, that's why it's so important to bring in someone who lives that every day, because it might not even be on the mind of someone who doesn't. And it was such a rich opportunity to deepen his character.
Okay, question back here.
Yeah, hi. First off, thank you guys so much for this talk. It's been really amazing and eye-opening. Personally, in my own sort of creative projects, I'm quite fascinated by folklore and folk practices and traditions from all sorts of cultures around the world. But I don't always have the budget to hire a cultural advisor. I guess what I'm asking is the thing that sort of draws me to these sorts of stories is the sort of universal themes that pop up in them all over the world, and so I am often very interested in adapting these sorts of ideas and themes into my own work. And so I'm just wondering, if you don't have that sort of budget for a cultural advisor, what sort of things would you guys look for in appropriate adaptation of folk stories and traditions and things like that?
A lot of our experiences as a culture and as whatever myth or legend you're borrowing from are often well documented. There are books, there are YouTube videos, there are public speakers. If you yourself can't afford to pay an SME or a consultant, and you don't have any friends of that cultural background, often just diligent research is what I would like to see, so that you're respecting the source material and like catching the things that you might not know. Also, LinkedIn has plenty of folks who are looking to share their lived experiences with people and would love to craft these stories. And if you put a call out there, and if someone's like, "Hey, you don't gotta, put my names in the credits and or something," right? Or like, they have their own form of compensation that they're looking for that you might be able to work with. You put the call out there before you decide that you're not going to even try. And then if that doesn't work, copious amounts of research is probably your best bet.
I think that's all the time we have for today, but we'll be outside. But thank you so much for coming to our panel.